Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 20 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Australian drumming legend Darryn Farrugia. Darryn was featured in the drum chair for almost a decade in one of Australia's highest ever profile television shows, Hey Hey It's Saturday. Through that experience, Darryn got to play with some of the world's biggest name entertainers. Please enjoy my conversation with Darryn Farrugia. Hi, Darryn, and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. Fantastic to have you here today for episode 20 in the series.
It's a pleasure to be here, and my apologies that it has taken so long for this to actually happen.
Our audience have just seen and heard a really good video from your website of a big band track called Bittersweet. It's a close-up grab of you playing the kit. Can you tell us a bit about that? What's the background to Bittersweet, that video?
Firstly, that video or that particular tune is part of a play-along package that was put together by a bass player in London who I did gigs with while I was there. His name's Lawrence Cottle. Lawrence is an amazing bass player, an amazing musician and arranger, and he runs his own big band. So he put together a package that I think was primarily for drummers, which involved, backing tracks without drums and along with charts, probably more of an educational package. And, I just thought it'd be a great opportunity to record myself and film myself playing along to this track because I like the track so much, and it's with the band is made up of incredible musicians, mostly based in London. And I just thought it would be sort of a good opportunity for me to play a song like that, and also then to have content on my YouTube channel where I was actually playing and not just educating, because my YouTube channel is essentially a sort of a platform for education. So that's really what that track is. And there are other tracks on as part of that package which I haven't recorded, and then I have recorded other play along tracks from other people as well.
Yeah, it's a great track, and it's a real good close-up view of your technique. A fantastic band. Were you actually, I saw a chart there on your music stand, but it looked like you really knew that chart. Were you physically reading that chart, or you were aware of how that part would go?
There was a section that the reason why I had the music on the chart on the stand in front of me was because there was a section of that particular song where there was a whole bunch of horn phrases and there were drum fills and stuff going on around that. So I just had trouble memorizing all of those little phrases. But for the most
Yeah.
part, the arrangement, the overall arrangement, and the bulk of the hits was something that I had memorized.
Oh, it's great playing, and we're going to see you and hear you playing a whole lot of different styles today. And the Music Mind podcast is really about, I guess, getting behind the scenes of great musicians and getting into their mind a little bit. I had the opportunity to do an episode with Alan Kaplan, a wonderful professional studio trombone player in Los Angeles, of about a 40-year veteran of the studio scene. But before he became a studio trombone player, for about a year and a half, he toured the world with Buddy Rich as Buddy Rich's lead trombone player. And I got the chance, if anyone's interested, to just have a look. I forget the episode number, but Alan Kaplan's episode on the Music Mind podcast. The thing that blew me away, I got to ask him a little bit, what was it like playing with Buddy Rich? And he said the band were all in their 20s, and I think Buddy was like pushing 60. And the thing he couldn't believe, and the boys in the band couldn't believe, is the energy. He said, like, Buddy would just, there's no way you're going to miss your phrasing, because he would just be giving you all of that direction, remarkably from a man who doesn't read a note of music. You obviously have learnt to read music on the drums,
Yep.
but you don't seem to be glued to it.
I sort of initially taught myself to read, and then I furthered that education by having a great teacher who was Frank Corniola, who I hooked up with when I was about 15. Reading was important to me because I had made a decision when I was 14 years old to become a professional drummer. I was that young when I knew what I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
And I figured that in order for me to achieve that, I'm going to have to learn how to read
Mm.
because of the sort of work that I wanted to get into, which was, really my goals were to get into a TV band and to play in recording sessions. I knew that I would have to read. And so that was really important to me. The thing is that, I heard this really great piece of advice that came from a Steve Gadd instructional video. And he said, you want to make it sound like you're not reading.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
the thing with drum
Mm.
charts, reading drum charts, and it's probably the same with a lot of other instruments and disciplines, is that drum charts are often written by arrangers.
Mm.
So in terms of the sort of the nuances of playing the drums, they are not necessarily entirely familiar with those or the conventions of playing the drums. It's like me hearing a particular chord. I would not dare write I would not write a voicing. I would write a chord symbol and allow a pianist or a guitarist to take care of the voicings themselves. So I think it's important for me to make the music sound good is to approach it in a way that I think sounds good, but using the chart as a means of kind of informing me what to informing me as to how to interpret that.
When I listen to you play, Steve Gadd come to mind, because I think if I had to use one word to describe your playing, I think it's groove. Do you feel like that?
Even just by you saying Steve Gadd comes to mind, Steve Gadd is still, my biggest influence and biggest inspiration. Since the age I first heard Steve when I was 14, and that's going back some time now. So Steve Gadd is still he's still an active musician at the age of 79. He's still touring the world with James Taylor. I got to see him back in April. I got to meet him. I've met
Yeah.
him several times. He's a hero. And I think the secret of longevity with great musicians is their ability to play music, their ability to put their ego aside and play music and serve the music, serve the songs that they're playing. And for any drummer, And again, Steve Gadd is a great example. Is if you can play a good groove, if you can lay down a good groove and make a song feel great, then you are guaranteed longevity in this industry. Because Steve Gadd's, let's say in the 70s and early 80s, he was the flavor of the month, and he played on a lot of records and a lot of very significant records, a lot of very important records. And then, the next wave of drummers come along and sort of take his place in terms of popularity. And a lot of those drummers come and go, and yet he's still here working and sort of remains enthusiastic about working and playing the instrument and playing music. And that's where my head is at. That's what is important to me. I'm working as much as I want to at the moment, and I hope that I can sustain this for another, at least 15 years. 20 years would be
Fantastic.
great.
I'm sure you will. Now, for anyone in Australia 40 years and older who was living in Australia, I think in the 90s, it would be hard for those people not to remember Hey Hey It's Saturday. Yeah, people would have barbecues. They would have Hey Hey It's Saturday parties. And our family, we look forward to it. It was the era of great variety television. But I want to play this clip first, and then I want to talk to you about it. You got the chance to play with three-time Grammy Award winner Trisha Yearwood. At the time you played with her, she was one of the #1 country superstars in the world. Your job here was a bit like Steve Gadd, to just do your job, and you did it brilliantly. So I want everyone to have a look at this clip. It's from the 1990s. Darryn playing the drums behind Trisha Yearwood.
How do I get through one night without you? If I had to live without you, what kind of life would that be?
What was the process prior to performing that live on TV?
Okay, so the band would have a rehearsal. Usually we were given about 20, maybe 15 to 20 minutes to rehearse. And the very first rehearsal would be just the band running down the chart to make sure that the chart worked, that there were, all the bar numbers added up. And this was an era prior to, Sibelius and Finale. So a lot of times the charts were handwritten, or they would be sort of a very crude version of a computer sort of spit out.
Mm.
So we'd run the chart down once to make sure everything made sense. There were no bad notes, no wrong notes, bars added up, all of that sort of stuff. And then they would get the artist in. The artist would do a run with the band, and then they probably do about another 2 or up to 3 runs with cameras so that they can work out all the camera angles and all of that sort of stuff. And then there could be up to 2.5 hours before we actually got to play it live to air. So we there was that little lapse in time where you kind of got nervous and hoped that you could at least remember some of the things that you had to.
Yeah. How do you keep your energy levels up, at the excitement, the freshness levels up, when it might be the 5th time you've played that 3-minute chart? How do you do that?
Well, I guess by the time we get to play it live to air, as I said, there's going to be there's anything from an hour to 2.5 hours may have elapsed since we'd rehearsed it. So there's a bit of that nervous energy that goes with that.
Mm.
And we are live to air. So, if you screw something up, there's no, hey, can I do that again? There's none of that. So,
No.
I
Yeah.
think at that point, when it actually comes to playing it, it's there's probably a bit of nervous energy there. And then in addition to that, there's also the fact that, this was our job. We did this every week. So we were kind of used to that. I got to a point where I wasn't necessarily nervous at the start of doing a show. That was just what I did. And then, if I had to go and do a drum clinic where I was playing to a room of, 40 or 50 drummers, that's when I'd get nervous. That's when I'd become very self-conscious and very self-aware. So
Yeah.
I think we kind of just knew how to turn it on when we needed to.
Now, was Graham the MD when you first started on Hey Hey?
Yeah. So the story goes that, and also before I continue with this, that era of the Don Lane show was really what I wanted to be a television musician because of that show.
Great.
Um, and that growing up watching that show was just so important to me and so important to my career, in terms of my career aspirations. So
Yes.
anyway, what happened was I think it was around towards the end of 1990, there were rumors going around that the Hey Hey Saturday band or Channel 9 had appointed a new musical director for the Hey Hey Saturday band, and that they were going to revamp the band. So prior to Graham Lyle, it was Peter DeVissa, who was a trombone player. He was the MD, and so this sort of rumor was starting to filter through the music scene here in Melbourne, that Graham was now the musical director for Hey Hey Saturday, and he was looking for a band, and my ears pricked up, and a friend of mine, Dave Newdick, a trumpet player here, said Graham wants you to call him.
Wow.
And so I got a call. I called Graham. It was about 2 days before Christmas of 1990, and I called Graham and I said, "Hey, mate, it's Darryn." I think by that point we he he had seen me play a gig about a year before that, and he stuck around till the end of the gig, and he was really complimentary. Like, it was really nice to hear him, because I looked up to him from the
Mm.
Don Lane show era, and so he said to me on the phone, he said, "Look, would you be into being the drummer would you be into the Hey Hey gig?" And I said, "Absolutely. I would love that." And so that was kind of like my big Christmas present of 1990. And at the same time, he also booked me for an album session for Deborah Byrne with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and he booked me for the Logies so it was
Hello.
all of a
Christmas.
sudden it was like,
Yeah.
the career that I've always wanted sort of just
Mm.
occurred in one phone call. And so Graham was the MD for the first year of me doing Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Yes.
And then from that point, Graham went over to Perth to teach at Whopper.
Okay. Yep.
And Daryl McKenzie came in and took his place for the remainder of that Hey Hey period.
Yeah. I mean, you've spent your life playing with wonderful players. Do you feel that Australia, at the top level, punches above its weight?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
I think so.
To give you an idea, I lived in London for about 4.5 years, and I had the opportunity to play with a lot of really great musicians. And I would say that the only difference between, a place like London and Australia or Melbourne or
Yep.
England and Melbourne or the US and Australia
Mm.
is that there are just more people in those bigger
Yes.
countries,
Yes.
and so there are more of those upper echelon musicians.
Mm.
But I'm playing with great musicians all the time here. I never take it for granted. I
No.
love it. It kicks my butt all the time. And so when I think, and I know that you're the same, when
Mm.
we think back in that era of the Don
Oh,
Lane show where the
yeah.
house band was a big band, and you
Yeah.
think, this is firstly something that we'll never see in this country
No.
again. And that was a world class TV show with a world
Oh,
class band.
I was glued to it every night, looking forward to it. You did a close-up look at what it was like playing at a session at Newmarket Studios in Melbourne. Now, I love this. The reason I loved it, you sort of did a Benny Hill moment at the start, but the reality of a drummer is, hey, you just don't turn up and the drum kit's there and everything's great for you. And I guess as you get older, what's it feel like? Is it in your mind as if, I've got to set that up, I've got to pull it down? How do you deal with that as you get older, I guess?
Um, you know, I've been playing gigs since I was 12.
Yeah.
And so I'm so used to, just setting up drums and packing them down. There have been instances in my career and experiences that I've had where I haven't had to do that. So, for example, in the years that I was doing Hey Hey It's Saturday, I would turn up to the studio and the drums were set up for me. They were
Great.
already mic'd. And
Yeah.
then last year, I toured Europe for about 5 or 6 weeks with the Cat Empire. The drums were set, they had a crew that set up the drums and packed them down. So all I had to do was turn up,
Yes.
play the sound check, make whatever little adjustments. As soon as we finished, I walked off the stage, the drums got packed down. To me, that's an absolute luxury. Last week I was in Perth I did 6 shows with Wendy Matthews, and I was back to setting up and tearing down the hire kit,
Okay.
so
Back to the apprenticeship days.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
if I don't have to do it, I consider that a luxury.
Yeah.
With regard to those videos that I've uploaded, so again, those videos I uploaded to my YouTube channel, I wanted to. I think I did about 4 or 5 of them where
Mm.
there's a time lapse of me setting up a drum kit and
Yes.
getting mic'd up,
Yeah.
and then just showing me either rehearsing or recording a take. All of that was done on my iPhone, and it was just at the very least to give some kind of insight as to the process and what goes on when I get called to do a recording session. During I've got, this is my studio. You can't see everything. I don't have
No.
everything mic'd
Yeah.
up at the moment, but
No.
during that COVID period where we were locked down, I was doing a lot of recordings in here,
Yep.
which I love doing. I love recording, but the opportunity to actually go into a studio and record in a studio
Mm.
and especially record a studio with a band, so we're all playing live in the studio. That's what I love doing. So that Newmarket session was for a jazz saxophonist here in Melbourne, Richard Pavlidis,
Yes.
and that's actually a really good album. That was us playing live in a studio.
So the
layering.
clip shows you on your own in a drum booth, but what you're saying is the other band that was being played live, the band were in the other part of the studio.
Yeah, they were in other rooms.
Yeah. Let's have a look at it because I love these clips. And as I said, I've shortened it right down here. But at the end, someone helps you pull the kit apart. I thought that was nice. A couple of
That's
other
nice
people.
of them. For free.
That's right. want to play a track from the Darryn Farrugia
project.
Now, this is obviously a quintet just playing live at, I assume, a jazz club in Melbourne. Is this a Melbourne jazz club?
Yep, the Paris Cat.
Right. And the song is called Bad Eggs. What I love about this is, and for anyone who's ever been to a jazz club, probably anywhere in the world, there's normally two men and a donkey in the audience, and the donkey didn't pay to get in most cases. It's very different from playing to millions of people on Hey Hey It's Saturday, or even thousands of people backing a name commercial act. But I think as a musician, if you're into creative music, and I'm interested in your feedback here, it's one of the most rewarding things you can do is to play to an intimate audience where you are playing live.
It's my favorite thing to do. I love, especially the Paris Cat. The Paris Cat has two rooms. They have an upstairs room, which is slightly bigger, which is the room that the Bad Eggs clip comes from.
Yes.
And then there's a room downstairs, which is a little smaller. And I'm not kidding you, like there will be people sitting, a meter away from me. And I love that. I love that very close connection with an audience. That is so important to me. So I love playing in jazz clubs. I love connecting with an audience. I hate the idea of playing in a pit and having no connection to the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done musical theatre. I did a lot of musical theatre, and I can't deal with being hidden from an audience.
Let's have a look at a little bit of Bad Eggs. Darryn, do you have different kits for the different styles? We just heard you playing in a jazz quintet. What's your equipment story? Do you have, tell me your drum story and maybe your cymbal story without getting down into what model hi-hats you play, but what's your general thing? What's the general thing?
Well, I mean, I have an endorsement with a drum company, but having said that, I am a bit of a sucker for vintage drums. And so my newest set of drums is a DW, and that set of drums is almost 25 years old. That's my newest set of drums.
Okay.
I've got this is a set of Yamaha recording customs from the early 1980s. I've got a Ludwig kit from 1966, which is that sort of typical Ringo Starr kind of drum set. And then my most recent acquisition drum set wise is a Gretsch round badge kit from the 1950s.
Wow.
And so I use those kits for specific purposes. So, for example, the Gretsch kit, I use for bop gigs. So when I'm playing jazz, sort of bop, I'll because that's the sound that I associate with that music. And then, for sort of rock, some sort of indie pop type of things, I use the Ludwig kit. I've used this on a bunch of recording sessions recently. And then the DW kit I use for recordings as well. I use it live. Um, so yeah, and I've got drums that sort of date back to the 1920s as well. So, those drums are 100 years old. And I do try to find a use for all of those things.
Wow.
And then and then my cymbals, I have an endorsement with Zildjian cymbals. I have done for about 35 years, something to that effect. And
Yes.
they've been wonderful. So I use those cymbals for pretty much everything for everything really.
Are you a believer that, like drums, like anything made out of wood, that they mature as they get older, that you get a warmer sound, or is that just all a bit of a
I'm not
mind
really
game?
sure about
Yeah.
that. Like
Mm,
it could be.
mm,
It could be the thing that I find remarkable is that, say, with this 1950s Gretsch drum kit, when as soon as I hit it, I thought, okay, that's the same sound that I heard on Blue Note records. That's the same
yeah.
sound that I
Mm,
heard, that I heard Tony Williams. That
mm,
was or Art Blakey or all of that. That is that sound. All of those drummers of that era played that set of drums. The same
mm,
sizes, etc. And then I would say the same thing with the 1966 Ludwig drum kit. That just has a sound that I would say it's sort of impossible to modernize.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't tune it and put heads on
Mm,
it on a way that make it sound modern. It just sounds as it is. This drum kit, I take that into a studio and I tune it a certain way and it sounds like Steve Gadd's drum kit.
so,
You know, so
yeah.
so
Yeah.
so as far as that thing, maybe the wood does something. It's an organic substance, so maybe it sort of, I guess, it reacts to um climatic changes, perhaps environmental changes.
Just want to take you right back to when you were a kid. You and me also share something interesting. I read where one of the first albums you loved playing along with was Willie and the Poor Boys by
Yeah,
Creedence. Now,
yeah.
what an album. I actually was looking for it because I've still got my original copy of that. Cosmo's Factory was the one for me. I just wore it out. But those albums, Willie and the Poor Boys, Fortunate Son, The Midnight Special, Down on the Corner, what an album.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of Doug Clifford. I was John Fogerty was my hero because he was the front man. And he played those beautiful guitar riffs that even as a 9-year-old kid, I thought, if I work hard, I reckon I can work out how to play Down on the Corner, that riff. Where some other player if I heard, as a kid, I'd get home from school and watch the Monkees, and there'd be some Howard Roberts or some session guy in Los Angeles
Me
playing.
too. I watched the Monkees when I
Yeah.
got home from
Well, there
school
you
too.
go. But you'd hear some amazing guitar player. I think that's not Mike Nesmith playing Valerie. But I also thought I might not be able to ever play that if I lived to 300. But I'd hear John go do 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 do, and thinking I could do that. But I got into Creedence that much that I loved Dougie Clifford. I thought Dougie Clifford had a big sound on the drums,
Yeah.
and I even knew he. Not that I've ever played drums, but I knew he had a Camco set of drums. I know he was playing Zildjian cymbals and Camco drums. And later on, I worked out that Warren Daly loved that set of drums, the Camco drums from that era. Warren said they were just massive. They were huge sounding. And if I think back to Doug Clifford, I bet you must have thought he was certainly a powerful drummer. He wasn't flashy, but he had a they were an amazing 4-piece garage band.
My dad had a collection of sort of country and country rock records, and which included about 5 Creedence Clearwater records. And for some reason, Willie and the Poor Boys was the album that I
Yeah.
played along to, of all of that collection. And it was around the time of when I turned 10 years old, and my dad gave me his drum kit because he bought a new kit for himself. And I just remember just in the garage playing along to all those songs like Down on the Corner, Fortunate Son. I think Effigy is on that instrumental is on that album as well, or I could have that wrong. But
The
every time
Midnight Special is on. I
Midnight
love that version
Special,
of Midnight
and
Special.
that's one of those songs that taught me to play a shuffle,
Yeah.
and it's funny because even now when I hear Fortunate Son on the radio,
Yep.
it takes me back to me being a 10-year-old kid. It's just somehow that just has this memory. So
Yeah.
I even now, all these years later, I listen to Doug Clifford, um, and just absolutely, love his playing. And he was also a traditional grip player like I am.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and in more recent times, I found out that other great drummers like Steve Jordan really rate Doug Clifford. And Doug Clifford sounds great. His pocket, everything on those records is just
Oh,
beautiful. I saw an interview on 60 Minutes. I think it was him and Stuart Cook, who was the bass
yes.
player in that
Bass player.
band.
Yep. Mm.
And I think they were saying that Doug sort of had some health problems, had cancer
Okay.
or something. So I'm
Mm.
not really sure how he is these days, but they showed some clips of him playing, around that time. So we're talking maybe about 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yeah, because I
And
think they're all about the same age. I know Tom Fogerty passed away, but I think John's about 80 this year, and I think Doug, if
wow.
yeah, if Doug's still alive, he would be probably 80 years old now. So it's
Well,
just time gets away.
he sounded great on these clips of him playing just recently.
Oh,
He sounded fantastic.
as was Hey Hey It's Saturday. Let's take the opportunity because I think a whole new audience who watch this. And for people overseas, I guess the only equivalent I can think would be Saturday Night Live. I think if you're living in America, because it was a really fun spirited show. I mean,
It
you had a bit of a
was.
reputation for occasionally sticking the head in front of the camera.
It's the only way my relatives would get to see me.
But it was that sort of show. No one would
Yeah.
say, no, 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 hey, don't do that. It was to me, it looked like it was a party atmosphere. Did it feel like a bit of a party atmosphere?
It did. Look, I'm so blessed to have had the opportunity to play on that show, and it was a good vibe. It was a really good vibe, especially when we traveled interstate to do shows, particularly Sydney, because when we would go to Sydney and we might pre-record a Friday and then do a live to air Saturday, and then on the Saturday night we'd all end up at the Siebel Townhouse and for drinks, the
Yeah,
crew, the cast,
everyone. Yeah,
everybody, and
yeah.
it was on for young and old, and it was a really good vibe. When that show ended, it was really sad. It was a really
Oh,
sad time, not
yeah.
only for the people involved in the show, but I think for
For
you
the
know for
audience.
for the audience.
Yeah. I want to look at a clip of you backing Roger Daltrey from The Who. Now, again, if you're 20 years old, this won't mean anything, but The Who were a massive supergroup. If you were in that era, did you used to look forward when someone would send you the guest list coming up for the next show? And, oh, by the way, mate, you're backing Roger Daltrey next
We
week.
would flip out. Like we would absolutely, bear in mind that I was 23 when I started playing on that show, so I was pretty young.
Yeah.
And it was, next week we're playing with Tom Jones, or
Yeah.
next week we're playing with BB King. It was
Yeah.
like, even now when
Yeah.
I'm 57 now, and I
Yes.
I look back on that and I think,
Yeah.
wow, was that actually my life when I look back on this?
Oh, well, like as I said, I'm 63, turning 63 next week. So I'm just a little older than you, but I loved how you also come up with the Don Lane era. For me, if I look back at my interest in music, it's definitely the Don Lane show, Hey Hey It's Saturday, Don Burrows and George Gola live in the jazz, that Sydney type jazz, Bob Venier, Pyramid.
Yeah.
Actually got to meet Bob Venny and had a couple of trumpet lessons with him. I still own a trumpet, can't play Three Blind Mice on it, but Bob was the nicest bloke you'd ever meet. And it
Yeah.
was just at the time we were at Bob's flat when Graham Lowell rang him and said, Bob, you're right to do another year of the Don Lane show. Oh, sorry, Graham. I've got this band called Pyramid. I want to dedicate next year to Pyramid. And you could tell Graham was, oh, I'm going to really miss you, Bob, but I wish you all the best. So my brother and me were just guests of Bob Venier. We're from Queensland. He invited, we said, we're going down to Melbourne. It'd be nice to meet you. Yeah. You's doing anything tonight? No. Pyramid's having a practice at some little hotel. Do you want to come around? David Jones, Jeremy Allsop, Bobby Venny. Yeah, we're sitting at a practice session of Pyramid as they were getting ready to go to the Montreux Jazz Festival. And I can tell you, I know you would appreciate David Jones as drumming, but for two guys from regional Queensland, we'd never seen anyone play the drum kit like that before. You know,
I'll tell you a quick story about that before we get into the Roger Daltrey thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of Pyramid, so my dad played the drums. I think I mentioned that earlier, and every year there would be some sort of music expo where, you know, all the latest instruments would be on display, and this would happen at the Camberwell Civic Centre. And the year was, I think it was 1981. I was 14 at the time.
Okay.
And my father took me to see, to go to this music expo, and they had this thing on, a drum clinic. I had no idea what a drum clinic was, and it was David Jones, and I thought, isn't he the guy from the Monkees? Like a
Davey Jones.
Yeah, it was Davey Jones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
the Monkees are here. Okay, yeah.
So I go to this drum clinic, and it's Pyramid playing, and David Jones. They played a few tunes, and then David Jones proceeded with the clinic, and he talked about being a professional drummer, and this is what he does. And that was the day that changed my life. I say this to a lot of people, and I've told David Jones this. I've said, mate, that I owe that experience to the career that I have now.
That's fantastic. And of course the keyboard player was the beginner David Hirschfelder.
Yeah.
Yes. And Mike and me, my older brother and me, we're sitting at a table with the late Stewie Spears listening to Pyramid. We're just thinking, what is going on? There was three of us, Mike, me and Stewie, listening, had our own personal That's introduction
amazing.
to Pyramid. Well, that has stayed with me. The sound of that group has stayed with me. I get chills even recalling it now. Let's have a look at Roger Daltrey and Pinball Wizard right in the heyday of Hey Hey It's Saturday.
All right.
Darryn, you were with Hey Hey, what, for the best part of a decade, I suppose, was it?
Yeah,
8 or 9 years?
It was 9 years.
9 years. This is a hard question, and there's probably no answer, but do you have a greatest memory of all of those acts, local and international? Is there any memory that is a standout? Can you pick one?
Um, I think of all the artists that I got to play with, I think my favorite was Bonnie Raitt.
Wow. Okay.
Um, I don't know why. I just remember that being a really great positive experience. The other, I guess the biggest name that I played with on that show was Tom Jones.
Yeah.
And the thing that was an amazing experience because going back to that period when I was a 10-year-old kid and playing along to records,
Mm.
another one of the records that I played along to was my mum's Tom Jones record. So it was interesting to take that record on that morning that I was playing with that day that I was playing with Tom Jones and asking him to sign it, that same record that I played a long time. It was just again one of those really fun.
Surreal.
It was
Yeah.
very surreal, and
Yeah.
also just the experience of playing with him was fantastic because we'd sort of rehearsed this song, and then Daryl Summers said, "I've got this idea. How about we start the show doing this?" And so they changed the whole thing, the whole start of the show, so that rather than us playing the opening theme of Hey Hey It's Saturday and then ladies and
Mm.
gentlemen, we've got a special guest, Tom Jones, blah blah blah. They said, how about we do this? We start the show with Daryl Summers coming out to sing with the band. It's not unusual. So we didn't have a chart for that, so we had to busk it. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea is that Daryl comes out, he starts singing It's Not Unusual, the band's playing It's Not Unusual. Tom Jones walks in, pushes him away or something like that,
Yeah.
and then we
And
start
takes
this
over.
then we
Yeah.
start this other song that we were doing with Tom. And like we had to pull that thing together within, I don't know, 15 minutes of going live to air.
Uh,
And so that was um a great experience because we pulled it together, and then plus we got to play with Tom Jones, which was amazing. We did that so much on that show. For example, the first segment of every show would feature a band playing at the not our band, but
yep.
just a pop song or a pop band miming
Yes.
to their latest hit single or whatever it was. And then we would listen to that. Our MD would say, okay, let's take that chorus and play that out into the commercial break. And we would do it without charts
Ah.
or anything like that, because everyone in that band had great ears and they were able to work things out really quickly.
Yes.
So yeah, and all of those guys in that band were aside from being great readers, but they were
Mm.
also really great jazz musicians as well.
You could
And,
tell.
and and so throwing stuff together or putting stuff together at the last minute was something that we had to be good at.
I want to move forward now. One thing I like on your website is you give equal billing to your role as an educator. I love it because it's clear to me that music education is really important to you. Can you talk about the genesis of that? Obviously, you had a really good relationship with a special teacher when you were young. How did you get into music education?
Um, I started, I got serious about learning, having lessons when I was 15. And interestingly, prior to that, when I was 6 years old, my parents took me to lessons. I don't have much of a recollection of that, um, but I think my parents could see that I was really interested in music. So as a 6-year-old kid or 7-year-old
Mm,
kid, they took me to lessons. And
mm.
I remember this teacher, well, my parents said to me that the teacher said to my parents, if he keeps this up, he'll be able to teach from when he's 15 or 16. And so
Okay.
anyway, I had lessons when I got serious about it and had lessons with Frank Corniola when I was 15.
Yep.
And then around the time that I started college, I decided that, I can make a little bit of money from teaching some young kids, as a lot of drummers do. And I enjoyed it. And I wanted to be as good a drum teacher as my teacher was for me. So
Wow.
I started teaching when I was 16, and that's 40 years ago. So now when I think about it, I've been teaching for 40 years. It's pretty
It's
amazing,
a
and
good effort.
I haven't let up. And yeah, so education has been important to me. Like during the time I was doing Hey Hey It's Saturday, I released an instructional video. I've written 2 books, and then I started this YouTube channel back in, the middle of 2019. So education has been a big part of it for me, and I would say that the genesis was just having a great drum teacher, and just wanting to carry on some kind of legacy in that respect.
Let's have a listen. You mentioned before a great saxophone player from Melbourne, Richard Pavlidis. And I've got to say, and this is a wonderful clip, that you have a beautiful acoustic sound on your drums. A lot of drummers that I've played with and I listen to, it always sounds, it's not electronic. I don't know how to describe it, but the way you play your drums has a wonderful woodiness about it. Is that a concept in your, are you aware that you are playing an acoustic instrument, I guess is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to what I was saying before when we were talking specifically about drum sets, that um, the drum set that I used on this particular clip is that 1950s Gretsch kit. So I have an expectation of how I want that to sound, and that also goes sort of hand in hand with how I play it. The way
Yes.
I think my touch sort of changes depending on the style of music that I'm playing.
Well, this is a gorgeous touch there. I suppose one final question, without getting too technical, the choice of cymbals, obviously as a drummer, is equally as important as the choice of the drum kit. What's your approach to find that magic relationship, or are you lucky that you just have a set of cymbals that work together well, and in essence that's your cymbal set? What do you do with your cymbals?
Well, I think I kind of suffer from that thing that a lot of drummers and specifically jazz drummers suffer from, and that is that lifelong pursuit of finding the right ride cymbal. It's just that it's an ongoing pursuit,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it can be very frustrating. So,
Yeah.
um, I always make sure I've probably got about, oh, I don't know, at least 10 ride cymbals for jazz,
Okay.
and what determines the one that I choose to play could be the room that I'm in, the
Yes.
style of music that I'm in, the volume that I'm playing at. I've
Yeah.
got cymbals that are slightly lower in volume if I'm playing in a small club or playing
Mm,
a sort of more acoustic trio.
mm.
So those choices are important with the ride cymbal more than any other cymbal for me.
Well, you certainly nailed a beautiful combination. Let's have a listen to Persona, the Richard Pavlidis Quartet. So, Darryn, you spent, close to a decade playing in the highest profile TV band in the country. Looking back, I'm sure there were so many positives, but were there any negatives? Did it become a job at any stage, or when you look back overall, I'm assuming it must be largely a wonderful experience, but were there any aspects of it when you think back that maybe were a little limiting, or think about that? It's a
Well,
long stint.
getting that TV gig led to other work that I wanted to do, like it definitely got me into the recording studio scene, which was great. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a stigma associated with being a drummer in a TV band, which kind of gave me limited access to working with some jazz musicians and definitely working with some rock musicians.
Okay.
And I I don't know whether it was, insecurity or elitism on the part of other people, but sometimes when you're given a lot of exposure, that can work against you.
Mm.
And I was never really one to let it get to me too much, because many years after that show had finished, I began working with a lot of musicians who may have had some kind of attitude towards the type of musician that I was, because I was
Okay.
playing in a TV band.
Yeah.
And, much to their surprise, they were like, oh, hey, you know, you're good at this, or whatever, you know what I
Darren
mean?
plays jazz good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
even
Yeah.
like I was, like I had things coming back to me about, like coming from different musicians, like for example, I was doing some teaching at the Victorian College of the Arts, which is where I went to college.
Mm.
And, like I heard things coming back to me, like, the college is employing, TV musicians instead of jazz musicians, and just
Oh,
just crap like that. But, I
yeah.
just see that as being, insecurity
Yeah.
on
It's just
on their
chatter.
part, or
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
just, just that people are just being protective of their scene, or their
Yeah.
industry. The reality is that, that show finished in at the end of 1999, so that's quite a few years ago, right? That's,
Mm.
over
25 years almost. Yeah.
20,
Yeah.
25 years
Yeah.
ago, nearly
Yeah.
nearly
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm working just as much now as I did then, but with
Yes.
with a variety of people
Yes.
playing a variety of music. I mean, I get a great example. Last year was an amazing year for me, because I got to work with a lot of people that I've wanted to work with, that I never had the opportunity to work with. So a lot of new people sort of came in. It's like, for example, I did some work with Paul Grabowski last year.
Great.
I played a couple of shows with Joe Camilleri.
Yeah.
Like I said, I toured Europe with the Cat Empire.
Yep.
So that the career part of it is still, it's still very important to me. And it's not because I'm scared that, if I screw it up now, that's it, I'm going to be,
No.
I'm going to be poor and all of that. It's just that, I love what I do. I have a renewed passion for what I do these days. So playing music is massively important to me. And I had a great experience last week, because I worked with Wendy Matthews, and I hadn't played with her before in her
Fantastic.
band. I'm in
Mm.
another band with her, but I
Mm.
had I hadn't played her music before.
Mm.
And it was just a wonderful experience, because it sort of went back to that thing of me being a 15-year-old kid thinking, if I impress this person, they're going to
Mm.
want me to work with them again. And that gave me something to work towards, and that's important, to me. I don't necessarily judge music, like I don't judge a drummer by, you know their chops or their ability to do certain things. Sometimes I judge them by who employs them.
That's a
you
good
know
point too.
and
Yeah.
and
That's a
and the
good
thing
point.
is, like,
Yeah.
like Keith Carlock is one of my very, very favorite drummers. And his if you look at his list of employers,
Mm.
the people who have employed him, from
Mm.
Steely Dan, Donald Fagen,
No.
James Taylor, all
Yeah.
of those people that he's played with, that's what impresses me.
But you left Australia for a period to live in the UK. What was that about? Tell us a little bit about that sojourn out of Australia for a little while.
I think for a long time I wanted to have a crack at living outside of Australia. And it was, really my initial sights were set on New York when I was much younger. prior to getting the Hey Hey gig, I was going to go to New York, and then I got the Hey Hey gig, so I stayed.
Mm,
And then I thought maybe Los Angeles is probably more suited to me.
mm,
And then just through a series of circumstances, including access to a European passport, meant that I could, I could live and work in London. So
yeah.
that's pretty much how that came about. And then, I lived there, I taught there, and I did gigs there as well. I played as much as I could with,
Just getting
if,
experience. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I suppose the tag to that question is coming back home, I imagine back to Melbourne. What was it like edging through those doors, having been away from the country? Because Australia is a bit funny in some ways. Being unseen for a while, was it hard to put your hand up and say, I'm back, give me a go, give me a crack, or not?
This surprises a lot of people when I tell them this, but it was harder for me to break back into the scene here than it was for me to break into the scene in London.
Wow. Yeah.
It was so hard. I could not believe it. I had a lucky experience in that, about 2 days after I'd moved back, I got a phone call to tour playing West Side Story. So I was
Hmm.
kind of stuck in a theater for 8 months, but it meant that I
Mm.
was able to save a bunch of money and get back
Yep.
on my feet.
Yep.
But like even maybe 3 years after I'd moved back, I still had people saying to me, "Are you still living in London? Are you visiting at the moment?" And it's like I've been living here for 3 years.
That's right.
It, it
Yeah.
was it was really
Yeah.
frustrating, and I said yes to a lot of work that I would not normally want to do,
Mm.
because I had to,
Mm.
and it sort of got me down, and the scene had changed in that 4.5 years while I was away. Like the studio scene had sort of pretty much dropped out,
Mm.
and yeah, it was really hard. It's now is good, but it's taken me a long time.
Is there any lesson from that? If you had your life over again, would you just do it all again and just find a way to snail your way back into the local scene, or would you maybe have stuck it out in the local scene?
Um, I'd probably do it the same.
Okay.
I just think life experiences are really important, and career opportunities and all of that stuff is
Mm.
really important. I'll give you a great example. In the time, I think when people ask me about the gigs that I did when I lived in London and what the standouts were,
Mm.
for me, the standout gig, apart from some of the traveling that I got to do and, playing in Europe and different parts of Europe, but I think the most standout gig that I got to do in London was 3 nights. 3 nights at Ronnie Scott's, supporting the Yellow Jackets with
Oh,
Carl Law's band. And that was incredible. That was
oh
just an
my
incredible.
OMG. Well, there's a life. That was worth the trip for that.
It was. I
You
mean,
know?
if someone said to me, "Hey, listen, do you want to
Yeah.
play supporting the Yellow Jackets for 3 nights at Ronnie Scott's?" But I'm here living in Australia. I'd fly myself over to do it.
Yeah. What's your take on the potential impact of I guess, to the work you're doing and maybe just to the music industry in general? Have you got a take on it, a feel for it, what it might head to?
I, I don't know yet, because AI doesn't directly impact what I do for a living. And in that, you know, my two sort of main income streams are teaching and playing gigs.
Mm,
So I'm not really affected by it's not affecting either of those things. I think it will affect. I mean, I feel really bad for voiceover artists, for example. They're the ones that are going to suffer from it.
mm,
In amongst many other professions, of course. But at this point, it hasn't affected what I do. And also I do some composing, and I do, I've released an album of my own music, etc. What I do seems to be immune. I think the biggest, like, I think Spotify has a far worse impact
mm. It's
than.
interesting. Look, I want to ask you about, I'm glad you brought up that album. So you're a drummer, yet you compose an album's worth of material. Do you play any other instrument?
Yeah, so when I moved back from London, I was living with my parents, and in their place, while I was sort of looking for somewhere to live, and I lived there for a few years. And so I thought, well, I don't have a space to practice the drums, so I took piano lessons for 3 years, and
Okay.
I haven't played for quite a while, so I don't really have I
Hmm.
can't really play, but I was really sort of studying jazz harmony, and so that I that really helps with the compositional side, because it just means that when I hear things that I know what that could I know how to work that out, and I know.
Joe Cocker. Joe, we lost Joe about 10 years ago, and Joe led a pretty tough life. I think at the time on Hey Hey, I don't know where Joe was on his ups and downs. Do you remember backing Joe Cocker?
I do. I was super excited to back
Yes,
Joe Cocker.
exactly. And Joe was one of those guys who had such a unique voice. Let's have a little bit of a look at Joe Cocker live on Hey Hey at Saturday. Darryn, you've got a wonderful clip on your website called Boston's Improvisation. Now, I understand this is an old drum kit. Tell us a little bit about, I just want to play a little bit, the opening section of this, but the drums sound beautiful. Big, warm sounding drums. Tell us the story behind this kit of drums.
This was the drum kit that was passed down to me for my 10th birthday. That was my dad's, and the clip itself is, I had the drums kind of tuned more for jazz playing. This was prior to getting the Gretsch kit. So this was also an exercise in recording the drums in my studio and just trying to get a really sort of as beautiful a sound as I could get in this room with the gear that I have. And I thought, well, I'll just play some improvisations on this drum set.
Well, let's have a look and a listen. And the other thing I love is that you, in a world of frantic fireworks on the drums, I just love you just start with single stick strokes. Just go around the drum kit just with a single stick, and you hear the beauty of each drum, and you gradually build that rhythm up. Let's have a quick look at Boston's Improvisation. Okay, Darryn. Well, thanks so much for being part of this. It's been such a good conversation. It's such an honest look, I think, at the life of a successful professional musician. If people want to reach out and get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Oh, they could do that through my website, www.darrynfarrugia.com. I think there's a contact button.
Okay.
Send me an email.
And just for anyone who struggles with spelling your name, I'll put that on the screen so there's no doubt about that.
Good idea.
What's your best piece of advice? I loved how you told your story, that for you it was single-mindedness. But if you were a young 14-year-old kid or even younger, and let's say a drummer, because that's been your life, who, like you, loves playing the drums, would love to do something professionally on the drums, but not too sure about the whole music education path, not too sure what to do. Looking back on a wonderful career, what's your best piece of advice you think you would say to that young lady or young guy that's so keen about music, but their parents are saying, oh, get a real job and you can't make a living as a musician? What's your advice to that person?
That's a hard thing to, I would say, be great at what you do, be honest with yourself, and just be a great human being.
Yeah. What's your take on music education? You obviously went in Victoria and Melbourne, you had the chance to go to a course. A lot of the people that I've talked to remember Ralph Pyle, wonderful Sydney trumpet player, saying he couldn't believe when the New South Wales Conservatorium merged with the university that Don Burrows and George Gola were not regarded as having any qualifications and could no longer teach in the jazz course that they set up. And Ralph just rightly says, something doesn't feel right about that. What's your take on music education?
Yeah, it's changing pretty quickly. Universities are like big businesses now. It's all about money. And I run the risk of getting sacked from the university that I teach in by saying this, but students are actually clients. They're the money paying clients. It blows my mind that one-on-one lessons are not considered important by universities anymore. I'm very worried about it, to be honest with you, because there was a time where I thought it was the be all and end all, but I think unfortunately it's the academics have taken over, and so therefore industry experience has no weight compared to holding some kind of bachelor's degree or PhD. I'm very concerned.
I think that's a fair comment. Jackson Browne, the writer of Take It Easy, the co-writer of Take It Easy for the Eagles, and you can hear it in his voice. You think, wow, you can just hear the Eagles in his voice. What a big name artist at the time you were back. And do you remember playing with Jackson?
I do remember it. It was, again, this clip is a career highlight for me. And I actually got to see Jackson last year because he was in Melbourne doing a gig. And so I went to the concert, and he sounds just as good now as he did back then. Like, his voice is held up beautifully. But I just remember that was a great experience. I think when Bonnie Raitt played with us, she recommended to Jackson to use the TV band, which was our band.
Wow.
And she also recommended the same to Keb Mo. So Keb Mo played with us as well.
Yeah.
And so it was really nice knowing that he was playing with us because of a recommendation from Bonnie Raitt.
We said it earlier on, it's an era that sadly will probably never return, but I have so many wonderful memories. If you ever doubt that people like you and the Graham Lyles and the Bob Venniers of those different TV bands made a difference, mate, some of my happiest memories were watching you guys living the dream that I think every little musician sitting at home and still going to school or whatever wanted to be, to play with those top flight artists, to be surrounded by professional musicians and just be out there doing it. And that's why I love how people like you are involved in music education, because you've sort of done it as opposed to read about it. You might not have a PhD in drumming, but mate, you've earned your multiple degrees as a drummer because you've actually done it. So all I can say is, thanks for sharing your time today. And as we always do on the Music Mind podcast, we get to collaborate. I get to collaborate with all of my guests, and I've had so much fun doing this. Me and you have got together on a Duke Ellington standard. Things ain't what they used to be. And I'm playing the acoustic guitar behind me, which is a beautiful guitar made on the Gold Coast. Wonderful sounding guitar. And you're in your studio, and we're just sharing the love of music. So thanks so much, Darryn, for being part of the project.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. Thanks for asking me. I realized our first communication was sometime last year, so I'm sorry that it's taken this long. But
It's
I'm
been
so happy
totally
we've done it.
worthwhile, Darryn. It's been totally worthwhile. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Every day I walk out in this torn up world, and I fight to survive. I'm laughing when I make it to the Saturday, and I'm alive, carrying your smile with me. Oh yeah, carrying your smile with me. Every day like sunshine. Everywhere I look, I see this world slipping down that the road day by day. And I just go on working for the things I need, making my own way, carrying your smile with me. Oh yeah, carrying your smile with me. Hey, hey, yeah. Take a walk on the troubled side of this old town. Take a walk on the broken streets and buildings falling down. Look at all these kids with nothing but trouble in their eyes, trouble in their future, trouble in their lives. Some bridges are falling down, some bridges are still around. Every night I listen to the sound of the street, lying in my bed. I love to see the dreams that are dancing there in the light up of your head. And sometimes I get so weary, and when hope is caving in, you fill me with your loving and your laughter, babe, until I get back up again, carrying your smile with the streets of this divided town, carrying your smile with the smoking edge of the battleground, carrying your smile with the situation, poverty and the desperation, take a time to the realization. Every day I'm carrying your smile, some bridges are falling down, carrying your smile with me.
What an absolute honour it was to spend some time with one of Australia's genuine drumming legends. Here's a guy who, as a young 14-year-old boy, made a non-negotiable contract with himself to live the life of a professional drummer, based out of Melbourne in Australia. To live his dream and play in one of the most iconic television bands this country has ever had, and to play on recording sessions, live performances, and share his knowledge as a really prominent music educator on the instrument of his choice. Darryn is still doing exactly what he wants to do. And I was blown away when he said he hopes to be doing it for at least the next 15 or 20 years. We can all learn so much from Darryn's super positive approach to life. It was an honour to share a duet with Darryn, one of Ellington's most famous jazz standards, Things Ain't What They Used to Be. I hope you enjoy it.